name is Anish. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO here at Knit, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Kelly Kudis, who is a director for the Customer Insight Center over at BCG. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Anish. Nice to see everyone.
Awesome, and glad you found your way back to Chicago today.
I did. So I spent 16 long years in Chicago working in consumer and brand insights at boutique strategy firms, and made my way into the management consulting world very smartly right after I had my son, my second child. That was odd timing, but have been at BCG since 2021. And when I'm not working with the Center for Customer Insight at BCG, I am a mom to my 2 kids, and I actually just moved to Boulder, Colorado. So it's nice to be back in Chicago today, but I do look forward to getting back to the mountains.
Awesome. Well, again, thrilled to have you here today. For those of you hearing about Knit for the first time, we are a platform that combines the rigor of agency quality quant and qual with the benefits of DIY costs and speed. We do this through our AI research, or researcher-driven AI, which takes the most time-intensive aspects of research off your plate. So at the end of the day, what we help our partners with is running both quant and qual in the same data set. Kelly and I will be talking a little bit about that today so that you can get the why to your what. We help you also take the most time-intensive aspects of your research off your plate because our AI does the first draft of everything from survey design to analysis to reporting. Ultimately, what this helps you do is it gets you a stakeholder-ready report in less than 24 hours. So a great way to help you just turn that data into stories. And finally, we do it in a way where the researcher is always in control. That's, again, something we'll talk about today. We're very much researcher-driven. You're always connected with and have a dedicated researcher on your team, as well as have full control over what goes into the AI and what's coming out of the AI. So with that, to the fun stuff. Kelly, can you share a little bit more about your team at BCG, how it's set up, the work you guys are typically doing?
Yeah. So many may know, but some of you may not know, that BCG is a really large management consulting firm. We have more than 30,000 employees across 50 different countries. And our whole reason for being is to help companies solve problems. and those problems span literally every aspect of running a business. So that certainly includes challenges that are close into the market research industry, like those in the realm of marketing. But they also are related to things like operations or risk and compliance, how to design organizations, people and org design, really runs the gamut, and that's what BCG does. But in order to do that, you need experts. You need some people who know what they're doing in specific functions, and that's where the Center for Customer Insight comes in. So we are a center of excellence for all things customer research and customer insight within BCG. There's about 150 of us globally. We are all quantitative, qualitative research experts, survey operations specialists, data scientists, practitioners of all stripes, and we plug in to large strategy cases whenever there's a need to understand customers, or really to understand people and decision making and how to influence them using classic and cutting edge customer research approaches. And certainly we work on, like I said, very common market research challenges. For example, like just this past year, I worked on a brand positioning and experience strategy project for a luxury travel brand. I worked on a loyalty program optimization, loyalty build from the ground up. I've helped build out the innovation pipeline for an industrial goods company. So things that are maybe a little closer into market research, but also have a lot of projects that use classic customer research methodologies, but that apply them to like novel kind of business challenges. So for example, optimizing operations within retail establishments by diagnosing employee pain points, customer service pain points. So doing research with employees, but ultimately to improve store operations. Building enterprise asynchronous training programs for companies that have workforces of like tens of thousands of employees. How do you build training curriculum and platforms to train their employees using customer research to inform that sort of thing? Even down to like reinventing the customer insight or customer intelligence function at large client organizations, like helping them rethink how should we structure our team? What should our ways of working and processes be in the age of AI? So the Center for Customer Insight touches all of those different types of challenges, which is pretty exciting and is the reason that I wanted to kind of break in when I had the opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's what makes this presentation that we're about to do so fun is because you cover so many different business objectives, research objectives, and methodologies. And the way you've been using this Qual-at-Scale across those different workflows is really interesting. So excited to dive into what we're going to be talking about today. So again, as the title shared, we are going to be talking about how Kelly and her team are using Qual-at-Scale for these different workflows, for these different use cases across BCG. Now, before we dive in, Kelly, we've talked to a lot of people about Qual-at-Scale, and everyone has a slightly different definition of it. What is your definition of Qual-at-Scale, and what have been some historical challenges in actually running true Qual-at-Scale?
Yeah. The two words that come to mind for me are big and fast, which are two things that traditional qualitative research typically is not, right? When I think Qual-at-Scale, I think sample sizes that rival that of a respectable quantitative study, or at least get you into like the high, 50s, 60s, 70s. The largest study I think I've done with y'all has been 800 at this point. I would never be able to conduct 800 interviews. I mean, kill me. That doesn't sound fun. But Qual-at-Scale opens up that possibility, and also fast. So even if I could do 800 individual interviews or reach 800 customers in focus groups, it would take so much time, so much coordination, and so much money. It's just not practical. So to me, Qual-at-Scale is doing both of those things fast, getting a lot of people and getting them really fast.
Absolutely. And what have some of the challenges been outside of sample? What else have you run into when running Qual-at-Scale?
I mean, certainly being able to analyze a large corpus of qualitative data. It's one thing if you, the moderator, have heard every discussion. You can get a whiteboard, and even without looking at transcripts, you can get to a pretty good synthesis of themes. But if you're collecting data from 800 people, you're not going to read every response. And so having the capability to analyze and still get depth and nuance that you would get from a traditional qualitative study, but asynchronously and with AI, that's what I think is necessary to really achieve that scale, but also still get that depth that's critically important and the whole reason for qual versus other means of exploration.
Absolutely. And now we'll spend a little bit of time on is talking about how NIT helped you unlock some of these challenges, but then I really want to focus for today on how you guys have been using Qual-at-Scale across the organization. So you mentioned a little bit about the sample, right? And I think that's where our sample strategy, we call it BYOP, bring your own panel. We layer on top of the big panel marketplaces. You can bring your own panel, which I know you guys have done in some cases as well. You can bring in different panel providers. We're really focused on being the technology that sits on top of it and qualifies that data, making sure that you're getting real respondents because we're collecting videos on them, seeing if they are who they say they are, if they're able to actually talk intelligently about this topic. Now, we have great coverage across the US and now globally. One of the things I find really interesting about how you guys have used us is you use us a lot for B2B research as well. Can you share a little bit more about that?
We do. I think it might be a function of like the management consulting context, but about half or close to half of the projects that we've done with you have been B2B. So I really appreciate that. Sure, we can tap into your consumer panel for like CPG or retail or travel studies, but we can also tap into specialty vendors, which either we can connect you with or you can bring on if we need to reach like physicians or if we need to reach IT decision makers or financial advisors, all the different types of folks who we bring on. We've also used, I think, links to go to client lists and source panel that way. So I appreciate the flexibility to be able to take the platform and apply it to the population that we need for our particular client challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes it really flexible, I think, at the end of the day, really modular, which is really what this is all about. Now, to your point about analyzing all that data, when you do those more consumer gen pop type research studies where you have 800 respondents all answering 3 or 4 videos, the analysis becomes so important. Can you just share a little bit more about what about NIT's analysis has unlocked your ability to do Qual-at-Scale?
It's just really spot on. That was the language that a colleague of mine who used it on a study that I'll talk about in a moment used the other day to describe like the quality of the thematic analysis. I appreciate that you can drill down not only to different topics or themes, but to the sub-themes within them. But then more importantly, because a lot of platforms do that, is that it's a really user-friendly experience if you disagree with some of the coding. Because the reality is AI does not necessarily capture like sarcasm. It doesn't necessarily pick up on that. We actually did an employee internal branding survey where there was a lot of sarcasm in the responses. And so what we appreciated was the ability to like look at the themes, look at what was tagged according to those, and literally click a button to say, nope, this one doesn't count. Like they were putting it on the chin or whatever the expression is. And so just the fact that the researcher is kept at the center and that I can like shape the way that the AI is interpreting, and then that teaches the AI in future analyses on that same corpus of data, I think is really valuable and like keeps my job security, right? Like it validates my role that like my lens and my context is still important as the researcher.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's core to our researcher-driven philosophy, right? It's the AI is only as good as the person behind it, driving it, prompting it, giving it feedback. And yeah, that's how I think we've been able to reach that level of being spot on for you and the work that we've done with you. Now, the last thing is around storytelling in that context, right? One of the key use cases you guys have used it for is taking those videos, clipping them together, and bringing to life some of the data that you're sharing with your stakeholders or your end clients at those like C-suite meetings. Like, can you share a little bit more about how you guys have used it for that?
Yeah. I mean, to me, bringing customer footage is table stakes of qualitative and table stakes of like customer research in general, because we're here to advocate for customers, and I like putting them at front and center and letting them tell their story where it's appropriate. It's so much more powerful than like a bar chart or a percentage. And so I mean, yes, like we needed a partner that had that, like that was non-negotiable. And I think the tool itself is really user-friendly. In order to make a video clip, like I grew up in an era where you had to like mark down the start time and the stop time of a video and then like do that for every video clip you wanted and match that up with the transcript. It was very painstaking. And so you don't have to do that here. And so I really appreciate that.
That's great. Yeah, that saves you a ton of time there for sure. Now, what I want to talk about now is how you guys have been using this, right? So we talked a little bit about some of the challenges, how you've used it to kind of unblock some of those challenges. Can you share a little bit more at a high level? What are your core use cases? I know there's several, but what are the core use cases for you guys using Qual-at-Scale?
So there are a number of them, and we're continuing to find additional use cases, but the three main ones are first pre-study. So before we do a large strategic, typically a quantitative engagement, getting really smart about the category and the customer, capturing customer language and the right differentiating variables, et cetera, to make sure that we get the most out of the really, really big strategic piece of research that a lot of decisions and a lot of actions are going to be taken out of. So that sort of like informatory research is a major one. Another is around what I would call context building, which is like, okay, we have a specific customer segment or a demand space or a theme or an issue, and we want to get some more color commentary around that. We want to bring it to life, or we want to dig deeper on something specific about them. So that context building is another one. And then the last one is sort of a catch-all, which is like, because the proper traditional way of doing things is like going to be too long or too expensive, and we need something a little scrappier, we need something a little bit faster, we wouldn't be able to do things the right way, so we're going to do Qual-at-Scale instead. Those are my main use cases, and we have a lot of examples in each of those buckets across our last year and a half or so.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about some of those examples, starting from the pre-survey. I think, the way you described it to me, it's almost like an insurance policy on this really large study that you're about to invest a ton of time, money, effort, resources. One of the biggest questions we get a lot from our partners is, should I think about Qual-at-Scale as a replacement of this traditional method that I'm doing, or as a complement? And I think in this case, you guys are really using it as a complement. So can you share like an example of how you've done this in the past?
Definitely. So at BCG, we sell a lot of what is called demand-centric growth, which is at its heart it's segmentation that leads to a strategy phase, an activation, and an implementation phase. So it's taking the strategy from the segmentation and then like doing a lot of things with it, whether that's innovation or whether it's digital marketing, targeting, whether it's repositioning a brand or brand architecture, et cetera. There's a lot of really big, expensive, and impactful decisions get made from it. And the reality is consulting moves really fast, right? Like it moves at a breakneck pace, especially compared to what I was used to when I was in industry. And so while there are still many cases that do build in time for traditional, like longer form, conversational, qualitative focus groups, interviews, what have you, to inform that segmentation questionnaire. But there's also a lot of teams that are like, we don't have the money, like we just gotta go. And I'm the one who has to say, well, hold on, like let's make sure that you have the right ingredients. And so with Qual-at-Scale, like AI-powered tools, we've been able to do that informatory qualitative research when previously teams would forego it and just rely on like desk research, past client research, et cetera, which is the reality you live in sometimes, but now we are able to do research where research wouldn't have existed up front, right? And so that is super valuable. And ultimately that helps prevent blind spots in the strategic, survey instrument that's going to be used to drive a really big engagement. And this has been such a big use case for us that we've actually come up with a template of like 5 open-ended questions that we ask using Qual-at-Scale capabilities that are mapped to specific sections of a typical DCG questionnaire, acknowledging that everyone is different. And we've mapped them to the sections that we know tend to have the biggest impact on like defining the segments. And so we've been able to sort of like productize that process and make it really easy for teams to integrate more research into their research lifecycle. So that's been really valuable. And importantly, it's not just B2C segmentations that we're doing this for. We actually just kicked off a study where we're going to be doing a sales and channel strategy for a CPG company that's seeing decline in like small shops, like independently owned convenience stores, essentially in a particular market. And we're doing some Qual-at-Scale. Now it's a smaller scale because it's B2B and SMBs, but with that, we're going to be able to really refine some hypotheses, get the right language, and also get some diagnostic insights to fuel like the broader phase of research in that strategy case.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting how you guys productize that because now it's just moving like clockwork, right? Like any single time you have this big traditional type of research that you're doing for that specific kind of approach, we're able to get those questions answered for you really quickly and just help guide a lot of the kind of discussion guides that are going into that. Now, the second piece there is really around, how are you building context with the Qual-at-Scale? So you spoke a little bit about the importance of qual, bringing it to life. What's a good example of this that you've run in the past?
Yeah, I have 2 actually. So one was really recent. We did a demand-centric growth engagement for a large fitness player, a fitness brand, and they had identified a couple of target segments, target demand spaces. One of which was a really premium-oriented consumer, engaged with a lot of the higher-end brands in the fitness space, both like in-person gyms, but also like different technology and athletic wear, et cetera. Like you can imagine, paint a picture of that consumer in your mind. But what was really interesting and a little bit puzzling for the team was that one of the needs that really popped for this very premium demand space was value. And the team was like, what? Like, what? Like, are we supposed to be budget now? And so we wanted to do 2 things in building context for them. We wanted to just like bring the demand space to life, humanize the segment, make it so that people could really understand, get a look and feel for them, which is classic like bring to life type of qualitative. But they also wanted to dig deeper on value and be like, what does value mean for this consumer? And so we used some Qual-at-Scale, and got all the footage that we needed to bring them to life, but in addition, we're able to uncover that value for this consumer was not just about like lowest price. Value was about variety, and the fact that variety and access to different experiences for this customer is what motivates them to stay engaged in their fitness journey. And so that led to some very different conversations and implications about how they could think about value for this consumer. And so the activation is going to look very different than if they had just taken that word value at face value, right? So I thought that was really powerful. And then the other example is kind of funny. I think many folks in the room may have had situations like this. We'd done a ton of like extensive quantitative concept testing work for a brand in the consumer wellness space, and we had like aligned on the concept that was going to be what we were going to invest in and take forward for a new product. And then at the 11th hour, one of the important client stakeholders basically was like, I have an idea. And it hadn't been included in the quant test, and we were like, really? And so what we did was we did some Qual-at-Scale to compare that concept with the concept that had won in the original quant in order to sort of like prove once and for all, like, where is there more enthusiasm? And actually using some of the footage, we were able to very decisively disprove that this brilliant 11th hour idea was actually that brilliant. And then the team was able to really kind of tamper any skepticism and really align and rally around the concept we wanted to take forward. So another example of where like building that context through Qual-at-Scale can be really helpful in stakeholder management as well.
Absolutely. It's hard to argue against the voice of the customer, especially when you can quantify it as well, with a large enough sample there. So, to wrap things up, the last area or use case that you mentioned here was using Qual-at-Scale when you might not have the time or you might not have the budgets. And this is an area where, like, when we talk about, is this a replacement or a complement, it could be a really great replacement in terms of, you might not have the time or the budget to do it, and something is better than nothing. So would love to hear your thoughts on where have you guys leveraged Qual-at-Scale when you might be running short on time or your client might not have the budget to run more traditional types of research?
Yeah, we had a engagement last year where a nonprofit, so less budget, nonprofit organization, membership-based, came to BCG because they were seeing declines in membership that had been going on for a while, and they wanted to understand how to like stop the bleeding, but also they wanted to understand like the value prop, like do we have the right brand, like how should we be talking about ourselves in this new era, et cetera. In a perfect world, we would have done a very comprehensive, like in-depth qualitative market study with current members, attrited members, prospective members who, are joining other organizations or not coming to the organization at all. We would have gotten brand equity data. There would have been a lot more work that we could have done, and they just did not have the time or money for that. They wanted something a bit more diagnostic, and so we used Qual-at-Scale to do research again, where like research wouldn't normally have been possible. We still spoke to folks from those different populations, and we asked some very pointed, targeted questions, both in an open-ended and also in a quantitative fashion, because the platform does allow you to ask both quant questions and selfie video questions, as I call them. And we were able to, from that, really diagnose some core issues that the brand was facing, and give them a bit of a roadmap for some quick hit improvements, and then ultimately signal to them, like, here's all the rest of the work that you should do with us that is not in scope to continue the journey. So it was really useful. And the team, if we hadn't had this approach, like they would not have been able to go and do the more traditional route without something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just such a great example of, like, in today's world where agility, a lot of budgets are being, staying the same or if not reduced. This is a lot better than doing nothing, and it can get you to some really great insights that might spark the opportunity to run future research.
And lest there's any question, I want to make sure everyone knows, I don't only do, and BCG does not only do AI-powered research. I am, at my heart and soul, like, I'm a moderator. I love talking to people. I love listening to people. That's like the reason that I'm in this industry. This is not a replacement, I don't think. It's a complement. Like, it has created opportunities for research where research wouldn't have happened otherwise because of other constraining factors. So I think there's a role for all of it, and that's what's really exciting to me is that like the basket has gotten bigger, if that so to speak.
Absolutely. Well, I know we have a couple minutes for questions, but before we dive to questions, thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate you walking us through all of this, and it's been so excited to work with you these last couple months, and excited for future partnership here.
Thank you.
Awesome. Do we have any questions in the last 5 minutes?
Talk more about the actual like execution part of the Qual-at-Scale? Is it like selfie videos, like the actual like operationalizing it?
Yeah. So the way we think about Qual-at-Scale, and the instrument itself looks like a traditional quant survey, where instead of videos or open-end text, you have video responses. So think about these as like 1 to 5 minute long video responses that someone's literally pulling out their phone and taking a video of. And you could include, I mean, I'm curious to hear how you guys have played around with it, but most of our customers are doing somewhere in like a 15 to 20 minute LOI with like 3 to up to 7 of these video response questions.
Yeah, what I tell people is like, I tell my teams internally, like 5 video questions is like a good max. Like you can go longer, but like I think beyond that, then I'm like, well, maybe we just like maybe do a longer interview if you're really going to get that many videos. And what's nice is that everything is auto transcribed, translated if we do it in different languages, and then obviously analyzed by AI. So that's helpful.
You mentioned like that last minute concept coming in after you execute the study. Are you able to recontact folks after like engaging in like a concept test or something like that?
Yes, that is a feature we have available now. As long as we know upfront before we run the study, we can recontact. Yeah, we're panel agnostic. So we do have partnerships with panel marketplaces. We have partners that bring in their own panel in some cases. Yeah, it's pretty open.
We have not. It doesn't mean that we couldn't. We have, for example, there have been clients where we've talked about like establishing a voice of customer program for them where we might set it up and then they might take it over. So that hasn't come up yet, but we could do that. In general, our Center for Customer Insight team, like our expert team, is embedded with the strategy team, and they're ingesting the data from the dashboard. There's automated reporting features that we make use of, but we often weave those insights into like a broader strategy deck and roadmap for the client. So, but it does a lot of the grunt work of analysis, like that first pass of analysis for you. And then, of course, we can always dig deeper as we see specific themes that we want to explore further.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the output is it's like a PowerPoint report inside of the platform with all these cool AI tools for you to dig deeper in. So we have some partners that operate in a similar way as BCG in the sense that they're doing this for their end customers that just invite those end customers into the platform. We work with brands direct as well. Sir. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate everyone joining. And thanks, Kelly.